But first, as we mentioned last week, the Albanese government broke a key election promise when it hinted it was going to review superannuation tax concessions. Having badly underestimated the backlash, the government sought this week to kill off the debate while trying to save face.
The Cabinet has met this morning and had a discussion about superannuation. And today I'm announcing that earnings on super balances above $3 million will have a concessional rate of 30% rather than 15%. 99.5% of people with superannuation are unaffected by this reform.
The changes, if legislated, will not take effect until July 1, 2025. As you heard, Albanese stressed they applied only to a select few. But there is a catch. The government will not index the $3 million threshold, meaning that more people will gradually fall into this category through the natural course of inflation. And despite the government's insistence it acted appropriately, it doesn't change an inconvenient fact.
But it is contrary to repeated assurances Anthony Albanese made in the run-up to the election last year.
We've said we have no intention of making any super changes.
And if our opponents want to jump up and down and go to war on behalf of people with more than $3 million in their super accounts,
they're also going
then
to
that's
war
a matter for them.
They're also going to war on the notion of the broken promise. Your side of politics excoriated Tony Abbott for broken promises.
Far from killing off the issue, the government has only thrown fuel on the fire. What else do they intend to spring on the public?
It's not a broken election promise, it's a tweak. Any more tweaks coming to trust accounts, capital gains or negative gearing?
We haven't been working up any options on that.
But it could be part of the agenda?
Well, it's not something we've been considering.
But see, here's the problem. You said that before about super, and now you're saying that about that, and therefore it erodes your credibility in the electorate.
Yeah, but I'm being upfront with your viewers, Carl, and saying that...
It's not on the agenda yet, like superannuation.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers looked visibly uncomfortable there, but that was nothing compared to what he looked like when fronting 7 Sunrise host David Koch, when he gave a textbook lesson on how to pin down a subject.
So just say, yes, that you absolutely guarantee no change ever to the capital gains tax exemption on our family home. You can just say yes, I guarantee that.
Well, I can say to your viewers that we haven't been focused on it, we haven't been working on it, it's not something that we've been contemplating.
Say yes.
Well, I can't commit future governments to changes or otherwise. What we've done with this superannuation change, which I think people do recognise, is put it the other side of an election so that we can take it to the people.
OK, under your reign as Treasurer, you will never change the capital gains tax exemption on the family home.
Well, it's not my intention. It's not something I've been thinking about, working up, contemplating.
Just say guarantee.
Well, we don't know what the situation might look like in 10 or 15 years' time under other governments.
It prompted a frantic PM to rush to the ABC to rebuke his own Treasurer and try to gain control of the debate.
Your Treasurer has spoken on Sunrise this morning. He would not rule out capital gains tax changing on the family home. It said that's not your intention. Can you rule it out?
Well, we have no... Yes, we are not. We are not going to impact the family home.
Why not?
Full stop, exclamation mark.
But incredibly, according to some in the media, the broken promise was no big deal at all. The Guardian's Amy Ramikis even sneered at those affected by the changes.
Targeting superannuation and the tax concessions that are going there is a nice little tiny step that's mostly palatable in the direction of budget reform, because I don't think that there are too many people out there who think that if you've got $3 million in your super, you're doing it a bit tough.
And the ABC's 7:30 chief political correspondent Laura Tingle sounded like she was moonlighting as an ad executive for the government.
And the raids on super, actual or proposed, lie behind Treasurer Jim Chalmers' announcement last week that the government wants to legislate an objective of super. An assessment released by the Treasurer today shows that the cost of super tax concessions has grown to about $50 billion a year and is continuing to climb. That raises questions about the equity of the scheme and its financial sustainability. That's why the changes are proposed for after the next election. The government will be seeking a mandate.
Now, this is just repeating the government's loaded statements. Over on the ABC Current Affairs show The Drum, host Dan Bersher was also running cover for the government's broken promises.
Andrew Tony Burke this morning said the government wasn't planning this before the election, but implied that the Treasury advice gave them a cause to relook at it. And that seems to be what the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, was saying there as well, that they got this information and simply couldn't look past it. That's pretty fair, isn't it?
Now, that's pretty blatant, isn't it? But you haven't seen anything yet. Remember, this is an issue that has divided many Australians. As such, you'd expect a panel discussing these changes would reflect that accordingly. But typical of the ABC, everyone on the panel, well, see for yourself.
And so the system is very generous. Even potentially with a 30% tax rate, there's still concessions available for those with those balances above $3 million.
And I think probably the political messaging that came out of Canberra today has, hit the mark in terms of most people don't have a superannuation balance of $3 million.
No. The class war is actually the creation of these loopholes. They're done to entrench the privilege of a certain group of people.
Now let's bring in tonight's panel, and I'm pleased to say I'm joined by broadcaster and wordsmith Kel Richards and Sky News host Caroline DeRusso. Kel, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on the way that the media covered the super blunder?
It's really quite bizarre. The level of trust that Australians have in government is almost at an all-time low, I've got to say. Now, when you think about that, it's to do with the language they use. And it's time some journalists, instead of playing the ALP game, said, let's analyse the language. So one of the ways someone who's a tricky professional politician who's been in the game for 30 years, did I mention Anthony Albanese, plays with the language, will say, we have no intention. Because our intentions can change, can't they? And we saw Jim Chalmers skewer himself by saying, well, we're not working on that. We've got no focus on that. They are word games. They are word games that they play in order to deceive and mislead. Now, why on earth are professional commentators, the ABC, not saying these people are playing word games, you cannot trust them? Your lack of trust in our federal politics is justified. It's worthwhile. Have a look and start talking about the phrases that they're using, so the people at home can say, using intention again, I know what he's up to, he's playing a game, his intention will be different next month. So even the promise on the family home is not a trustworthy promise because of the way they frame it. There'll be no impact on the family home. When they bring in a change, it will somehow be defined as not having an impact. You see, it's the way they play with language, and the role of journalists is to properly analyse what they're doing with language. And it's very deceptive. And there are journalists, and Jack, you keep telling us who they are, who are not interested in pointing out the deceptions.
Yeah, and Caroline, it frustrates me to see journalists not get upset by the fact that a promise was broken. What do you think of this?
Well, it's okay because the ALP is allowed to break promises. And we've talked about what Chalmers said before the election, but Anthony Albanese actually said before the election there wouldn't be any changes to super. And so that there is no different to what he's saying now about there not being any impact on the family home, full stop, exclamation mark, whatever. It shows that it means absolutely nothing. Some journalists are obviously a little bit more curious than others, and some don't, some are maybe less jealous that others have done well in life, perhaps better than they have. So what we're really seeing here from certain journalists, and particularly those in the ABC who we all know don't do it too tough, is the chip on their shoulder that they're parading around every time, they make excuses for the government on something like this when it's an extraordinary change. And it's very easy to message, Jack, by saying, oh, it's only the mean rich people, it doesn't matter. But that conversation about the purpose of super, that will impact everyday Australians. The conversation that's come up in the last day or so about taxing unrealised gains, which is totally anathema to the way that our tax system operates, that could potentially in time affect everyday Australians. So please don't think just because it's the rich people today that it's not you tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's terrible policy, mainly because it's not indexed. So there's a lot of confusion around it. But to cover it up for a lie because you happen to like what the lie then gives you in terms of a policy, I think is bad journalism. But let's also have a look at how the commercial free-to-airs have covered this issue.
Oh, look, it's tough out here on the streets of Double Bay this morning, Carl and Sarah. You know, the community, they are counting their pennies, they are counting the stacks of $100 bills that they have strategically placed throughout their penthouses and mansions in case of a rainy day. Because this is basically a class warfare, and let's face it, no one likes it when the rich are the targets, do they? So the poor people of Double Bay, or really I should say the mega wealthy of Double Bay, are rallying together this morning. So we took to the beautifully manicured streets of Double Bay to see how everybody's feeling.
People are very despondent. They're going to be ordering less coffee now, and they're not sure how they're going to get through their day.
How are they going to pay for those almond lattes?
They're going to have to sell some of their properties.
Are you a middle-income owner?
At the moment, yeah.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
I don't want to talk to you. No. What are you going to do? You're going to have to sell the second Mercedes?
No, not the Mercedes. It's my third boat. My daughter's favourite. It's grim, but we'll have to consider it.
There's going to be so many tough conversations had around solid marble dining room tables this morning, aren't there? I mean, you know, are they going to have to sell the second or third Mercedes, maybe even downgrade to an Audi or a VW? I mean, you know, Winters and Whistler, they're not going to pay for themselves. It's tough.
Kel, it doesn't really have much substance. It's a bit of a vacuous segment on the issue, isn't it?
Look, I remember talking to a British newspaper man who said there are a lot of journalists in Australia who are not in the news business, they're in show business. And she's one of them, and she's quite funny. It was very entertaining.
It was funny, wasn't it?
If it's being presented as news and information, it's actually swallowing exactly the same lie. I mean, Caroline's made the point that they're coming for people with over $3 million balance at the moment, but who else is going to end up being... The $3 million will come down for a start. But the other thing is, there are a whole lot of people caught up in this that these journalists don't understand and are not talking about. People who take their super as an annuity, as a lot of public servants do and politicians do, they are deemed to have a certain balance. And the balance is such that it won't be 80,000 people, it'll be 212,000 public servants when they retire. So it's actually far more complicated than anyone like this understands.
And Caroline, this journalist clearly did not understand the issue, which is why it was trivialised in that way. But for people now who are retiring now with $3 million balance, maybe that's a fair enough argument. But if you're in your 20s and you're building up your life savings over the next couple of decades, and it's not, you know, going to change that cap, you're going to be in strife. You're going to be approaching that threshold.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will slowly, by way of a bracket creep, essentially, encapsulate more and more people. And look, $3 million is a lot of money, Jack. You know, I don't want to belittle that notion, because it is. And a lot of people aren't going to have anywhere near $3 million to retire on. But, you know, when we look at how we're living longer, we are living so much longer. And if you think if you retire at 65 and you live till 90, you know, $3 million really over that period of time, when you take into account inflation and all of those sorts of things, you know, I mean, it's being carried on as if it's the overlords and the lords of the manor here who have got this. And it is, look, it is a big amount of money. But if you look at it from the bracket creep point of view, you look at it from the inflation creep point of view, and you look at it from the point of view that we live longer, you know, I think some of the snide remarks are a little unfair. And also you think about all those people, you know, there are people there who have worked really hard. You think about the people who have actually earned that money. I really think it's a little bit distasteful to have a crack, because you know what? Some of those people probably would have liked to have taken a holiday sometime in the 30 years that they didn't take one.